wait on that piece, I'm going to quickly cover what's going on in my world. So, first, if you haven't already seen, I have been diving into return to office leads. A lot of companies are now stating 5-day remote return to office, where remote is canceled pretty much. So, I'm looking to see if those leads could be viable for creative finance deals. Content wise, still working on finishing the course for the Data Driven Investor's Guide to Real Estate, which section one is available for free on the channel. And personally, I am so excited. My Mexico condo has been on delay for about 18 months, but finally, I received news that it is going to be delivered in December. So, scheduled my flight, have my mom coming out with me to do the final closing, and then set it up as an Airbnb. So, for the main event, we will have Vince Harris from Real Estate API provide information on real estate data, where it comes from, and how you could utilize it for your own business. But first, I do want to touch on the differences of a data supplier and a consumer product, because I see these get confused a lot. So, if you've ever watched the movie Ratatouille, which is one of my favorites, he makes amazing dishes that really wow individuals. But Ratatouille is not actually going to the farm to get these ingredients, right? Instead, Ratatouille has these ingredients already set in a pretty much systematic way so that he can actually create these amazing dishes for other individuals. So that's basically the difference, put simply, of a data supplier and a consumer product. Data supplier provides that data to actually power a product similar to coffee closers. So here I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to bring on Vince. Hey, Vince, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm great. How are you?
Doing pretty good. Super excited to have this conversation, to also get some Q&A. But with that, would love to just hear first a little bit of your background and what's your role in Real Estate API.
Sure. And I can go whatever direction you like. I'm not sure if most of your audience is developers or if they're mostly real estate folks or some hybrid of the two. My background is a little bit of a hybrid, less on the tech side, although I'm a founder in a tech company. I'll be as brief as possible. I'm a recovering finance guy, Ariel. So I worked in finance for quite a while, over a decade, big investment banks, Morgan Stanley, Bank of America. Then after grad school, I came to New York to work for a private fund, a $60 billion mezzanine and debt fund, Prudential Capital. We invested in institutional real estate, so the Brookfields of the world, things like that. But along the way, I started investing in real estate myself, nothing too serious, resi, rentals and things like that. And knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur of some kind, didn't know what that looked like, but I knew I needed some passive income to be able to support that endeavor. And so as I was buying properties, I was having a real hard time aggregating data. I was used to having lots of data at my disposal in the securities and private securities industry, Bloomberg Terminal and Capital IQ, things like that. And nothing like that seemed to exist. And so I would reach out to my business partner, who Ariel, Justin Winters. He's our co-founder and CTO, a brilliant systems architect, had been building big enterprise systems for his whole career. And I would have him help me to find, scrape, ingest this data so I could do my own analysis. And eventually we started making products. We decided there was an opportunity here for a business. Fast forward, we had some products that did quite well, got very successful in this REI world, as they call it. But what we discovered, Ariel, over the last few years was that our superpower really was in the back end, the plumbing. We had gotten a real expertise around the data engineering of getting the data into the application in the first place. And so to your point, which I think your analogy is spot on, when you think about the different product types, we were building what we would call kind of prosumer products. So they needed to be very robust and fast and high performing, but they had to also be beautiful and intuitive. And so we were able to meet both of those specs. And so a couple of years ago, we said, look, we know what it takes to build these consumer or prosumer level applications. And a lot of these shops just don't have the wherewithal. They don't have the money to spend the 250, 300, 4, $500,000 on data, which is what it costs, and we can get into that. Why don't we make our APIs available? Because that's what allowed us to make the products that we did. And so that's where Real Estate API came from. So that's a little bit on me. It's a little bit on the background of the product. Hopefully that's helpful.
Very helpful. And for those who have questions around data, even as simple as, hey, where does inherited data come from? Please
Yeah.
feel free to ask that in the chat and we'll get to it. But Vince, I want to ask you, so initially when I think of being able to get real estate data, why isn't it just as simple as being able to say, oh, I want data for XYZ city and being able to get it? What are some maybe complications with how regions are split up in the US?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Am I able to share my screen?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll do that. So I think if I just hit this plus button, yeah, and do screen share, and I'm gonna go there. Can you guys see this map?
Not yet. Oh, there we go. I see. I had to enable it. Perfect.
Yeah, so this one here. So Ariel brings up the fundamental issue in this space is that why is it so dang hard to get the data in the first place? Some of it is structural. Some of it is the fact that this data resides in more than 3,000 county offices around the country. And so whether it's a tax assessor's office or the county clerk or the recorder of deeds or what have you, wrangling this data for a product that's going to be used nationally means wrangling it across 3,000 entities. And so going to one is pretty darn tedious, right? You either got to go to the website or you got to scrape the website. There are some open data cities out there. DC is quite good. Florida is quite good. But it's just very, very tedious. And it just hasn't been a priority for these municipalities. And so you either have to do the work manually, or God bless you if you want to try to wrangle 3,000 counties worth. And since that is just untenable for most people, they end up either going to one of the big box data companies, the First Americans of the world, Atom, et cetera, or you come to us if you know that we exist. It's just a lot of folks didn't know that we existed until a couple of years ago. And so that's why we have become one of the leaders in this space and helping them to get this data in the first place, because it is so difficult.
Yeah, thank you for laying that out as well as the map. It really is pretty insane. Like when I first was looking into real estate data, I thought, okay, I could just scrape, my county for pre-foreclosures, and then I could just replicate that across the whole US. But then I realized that every single county can have a different structure for different types of potential leads.
Well, you know that better than I. And I've, first of all, really enjoy watching your channel and your content grow and seeing you help people think through just like all the way down to the nitty gritty of how do you use Python to go in and do some of these things, find this data, gather it, and I just, I can't imagine the knife fight that would be if you had pursued that route, right? To go county by county, page by page. It's really, really difficult. And so good on you for deciding to do something a little bit more elegant and work smart. And we're seeing more people get hip to that. Listen, if you're going to build something that is for your own personal use, or you're only ever going to be in one or two counties, yeah, maybe that's fine. That's fine, but we are talking to shops who are looking to build something really beautiful, really robust, put thousands, hundreds of thousands of users on it. And it's just not feasible.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not feasible to do, say, just a little bit of web scraping and then be able to scale that out. So what I want to ask you, Vince, when it comes to the term of big data, it has been around for a while, yet for some it might be a newer concept. Why is it maybe inefficient to, say, have a database that's in a spreadsheet? And how does Real Estate API, maybe at a high level, just structure information so that it is fast, like you said, for products?
Yeah. So it really is the evolution. It's sort of going from, again, whether we're using it for what we use internally, we talk about your house account. So if you're an investor and you're buying for your own account, spreadsheets are fine. Even if we have seen fairly sophisticated investors, family offices, for example, operate on spreadsheets, and that's fine. It can be fine up to a point. They make a lot of money. They do quite well. The difficulty is we're talking about, hundreds, thousands, maybe tens of thousands, maybe 100,000 rows, you know. But once you get into 20, 50, 100, or in our case, 157 million rows of data, um, that is just not, you're going to have a really hard time storing and certainly doing any sort of analysis on, and forget about trying to go in and do normalization of formats, of address types, and like doing that with a spreadsheet is it's just way beyond the pale, way beyond the expectation of that tool. And so you really have to get into proper data engineering, which is, I'm not a data engineer, but that's why we hire people who do that kind of thing. But this is really a specialty. It's an art. It's a science, of course, but it's also an art. And I just think there's a certain point, I'm not sure if you've heard the phrase, at some point, a difference in scale becomes a difference in kind. And the meaning behind that phrase is that at some point, it's not just that it's bigger, it is fundamentally different. And I think that's what Ariel is pointing to, is that if you're doing things on spreadsheets for the first 100, couple hundred, 10,000, 20,000 rows of data, you may be able to get by, but 10, 20, 50 million rows of data is just not, it's not tenable.
Thank you for that context. And the audience is a half and half, right? So it's some folks who do have a small business and maybe looking to systematize their process, putting their leads into something like Go High Level, Podio, and be able to automate and use APIs for the first time. Then on the other end, there are those who want to build their own products to help, say, these small business folks. But then they come to realize to get access to real estate data is somewhere between $30,000 a month.
Yeah, that's right.
So how does real estate API kind of solve for that for at least the prop tech startup space?
Yeah, so I'm happy to answer that. It's my favorite question to answer. But even before I do that, I'm curious, Ariel, from your point of view, as you are talking to this audience, and again, I really do feel like you have become an oracle of sorts in this space, advising this tier of entrepreneur and builder. How do they respond? How do they say that to you when they discover that it costs 20, 25, 30, $40,000 a month? Like, what are those conversations? How do those go when they come to you and say, good Lord, Ariel, here's what I discovered about the cost of this data?
It's absolute shock. And then the alternative is, okay, maybe I'll hire someone off of Fiverr to pull this data for me.
Right.
But then without having that technical know-how or that individual knowing how to structure the data,
Yeah.
it ends up being a project that can take anywhere from a month, 2 months, 3 months, spend $1,000 to $5,000, and actually nothing comes to fruition. So that's usually the cycle that I see, and then individuals coming back and looking for a little bit more of a structured way to follow through with their process.
Yeah. Not surprising. Not surprising. But the shock and awe, I suspect, that Ariel is describing is very, very common. We see it all the time. And so to answer your question, the relief that we believe that we are providing to this industry is that, and listen, we call them the cartel. It's a little bit tongue in cheek. I don't think that there's any nefarious intent on the part of those 3 or 4 companies that I referenced. And these are companies that everybody knows quite well. I just think that structurally, they are not in the business of serving folks like us. If you go and read the public filings for at least one of those companies, I won't say specifically who, that they talked in one of their quarterly reports recently about how nearly 70% of their income, their revenue, came from 8 customers, right? And so that just goes to show you that they are really focused on mega enterprise customers, number one. And more specifically, they are focused on delivering what we call flat files or bulk data. Another term you may hear is on-prem or on-premise data. These are the files, these are the contracts that Ariel is referring to that are going to cost you $20, $25, $30,000 a month. So these companies, they won't get out of bed, they won't take your call for less than $250,000, because that is the business model that they were designed around. And also, many of them, it's not their primary business, right? First American's a title company. And so the golden goose there is title. And they do have excellent data, but it's an afterthought, right? That business, it's quite large and there are things that they do well, but helping people like us who are building products is just not their focus, but it is our focus. It's what we do. And so to be even more precise about how we help, the reason that people have always thought for the last 10, 20 years that you had to bring the data on premise is because there was an assumption that to get the level of flexibility with the data, to do the transformations that you envision, and to do all the calculations and what have you, you got to have it on premise. And our API is so flexible, so expressive, that you can slice and dice the data however you need to the point that it feels like you do in fact have your own data warehouse. That really is the evolution and the innovation that our team brought to the market. That's why people like it so much in terms of data wrangling.
Huge, huge. And to summarize, these big data companies that do charge a lot of money, some of their main clients are title agencies, lenders, et cetera. So they don't need to take the call for the small business owner that's going to basically be pennies for them in revenue, which is why alternative solutions are required. And Vince and his company step in here. Then when you mention being able to feel like you have your own data warehouse. So I'm going to use an example here. When I worked with trading data, we would ingest billions of transactions daily. So something you can't even fathom to put into a spreadsheet. Now, our data engineers were such experts in how to what we call partition the data that we were able to quickly be able to extract and make an analysis on potential fraud cases. Now, when they were initially doing this, some of these fields were not partitioned, which would mean to gather just data, say from trade data from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., could take 2 hours. But after it was partitioned, it would be within seconds. So for those that are new to the big data space, it really does matter how the data is stored, how it has been structured, and it does require a higher level of skill set to do so, which if you don't have the ability to hire 180K plus data engineer into your team, it's important to work with a software or a data provider that does.
Yeah, I couldn't say it any better. And again, this is beyond my depth getting into data engineering, but as I attend and listen into the conversations that our guys are having, I mean, we've got, data science PhDs on our team. It's that nuanced. It's that much of a specialty to be able to do this work that Earl was talking about. And I hear them talking about, my gosh, just the minute level of detail they get into in terms of flattening data to make it, searchable and indexable fast. And so they can do the transformations quickly. So it shows up in that API layer as fast as you need it to. It is, it's just incredibly intricate work. And so the point that she mentioned that I hope you guys pick up on is it's not just the $250,000, $300,000-$400,000 data license. It's the 6-figure talent that you now need on your team just to manage the data. And that's all they can do. That's a full-time job. It's a full-time job. So it's the data plus the personnel, the human resources to manage the data. And it just becomes unwieldy.
Exactly. And then for someone like myself who wants to actually dive into it, build models, that is not able to be done unless you have the data in place. But with that, Vince, would love to open it up to some Q&A if you're ready.
Yeah, let's do it.
Perfect. I'm going to highlight this question from Eric. So Eric is looking to get a list of addresses and a zip code where he can have the estimated property value to filter on that for over $1 million. Would Real Estate API provide the ability to filter by the estimated value for off-market properties?
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is a fairly down the fairway sort of a search for us. We've got lots and lots of searchable fields, including estimated value, and they are range based. And so, yes, you could do that based on estimated value in a given geo or nationwide. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. And this was a question that came offline from someone in our group that asks, like, how are you able to get information like recent divorce or inherited? Like, where does that even come from?
So very good question. Let me say this, not to segue too far from the main topic, but we have both property data and property owner data I will tell you that property owner data, incredibly valuable, very difficult to wrangle and normalize and get into a place where you can reliably bolt it onto the property data. Um, and it's for a lot of different reasons. So divorce data you can get. I mean, you can go to the courthouse and get divorce filings. There are folks that we know who are doing things to find divorce intent. They are literally pulling data on internet searches, tying that back to an IP address, tying that back to a homeowner, and intuiting that this may be somebody with divorce intent. So people data, I find fascinating. In some ways more interesting, more sexy than the property data, because you get into the story of what's actually going on. Because the truth is, some of the stuff that we're talking about is very tied to the bricks and sticks, and depreciation and what's it worth, and rebuild value and material costs. All that's true, but it's really the homeowner, right? That is the star of the show. Whether they are a motivated seller, bricks and sticks don't have motivation. The people who own them have motivation. And so people data is very, very difficult. It's very gray, but it's also a very creative field. So where you get it from can vary. To answer your question, you can get it from divorce filings at the courthouse. You can do things like with this shop visit I'm talking about, where they're looking at searches for divorce attorneys. That's a little bit more of a triangulation approach. You can get it from, there are brokers for this data. There are what they call data co-ops out there, where you can buy all manner of things, not just divorce, but religious affiliation, political affiliation, and registration. So you can look at data co-ops. You can look at a lot of market analysis shops, some of the bigger ones that pollsters use and things like that. There are a few ways to get at it, but the genius, the thing that's most important is to find a way to tease out a story that you can reliably make projections and predictions about. That's very, very difficult. And then layer that on top of the property that they own. That's the magic of people data. I hope that's helpful.
It's incredibly helpful. Like you mentioned, it's not just the brick and mortar, the property itself, but getting to that second layer of the owner is where you're able to really find a great motivated sellers list as well.
Yeah, for sure. If the house is 100 years old, sure, it's probably a good indication of disrepair, unless that there are permits and things that show it's been rehabbed. But like Ariel said, it's really about the people inside. That's how you figure out where motivation lies.
Excellent. And we do have a follow-up question from Eric. So part of the analysis focuses on flip properties where the owner is a business entity. Do you offer information if the property owner is an LLC, for example?
We do. Another question. Very few of my answers, and I apologize, very few of my answers are straightforward, kind of single, because there's just nuance to all of this. Data is inherently gray. Yes is the short answer. The more complete answer is that LLCs provide anonymity for a reason. That's why people put things, title things in an LLC. They are supposed to be difficult to pierce. They are difficult to pierce for us. Our team has done a lot of work to, again, triangulate on who the owner of the LLC is. And so if you pass us an address, preferably the mailing address, not the subject property, because they may not be the same. So preferably, if you pass us the mailing address, we can do some of that work on the back end and get at the natural persons, as they call it. Because an LLC is a person in the eyes of the law. It's just called a non-natural person. So we can do the work to get at the natural persons that are tied to that LLC. And usually it is one of the owners, one of the members of the LLC. But here it's a little bit of an art. So the short answer is yes, but understand that nobody can do this 100% programmatically. There's going to be some shades of gray there.
Right. I think that applies to practically everything in tech, where it gets you anywhere between 70% to 99% of the way, but there's always like that 1% where data may not be perfect. And it will require some review. So also when it comes to the property owners, one of my favorite fields you have that you can filter on is investor buyer. Could you explain like what that is and why would that matter?
Yeah. So this goes into some of that intuiting that we were talking about a moment ago, is that we make what we think are some pretty reasonable fact-based assumptions about whether this is an investor based on real world behavior. If they bought it cash, probably an investor. If they bought it cash and sold it in less than a year, almost certainly an investor. If they bought it cash, or if this is the second or third or 12th property they bought in 18 months, probably an investor, right? So we can look at these behaviors and drop them into a cohort with a fair amount of certainty. That's how we get at a label like that.
Excellent. Yeah, that might be relevant for Eric if you're looking to delineate maybe for investor buyers as well for those flips. And I know Jose has done this research in the past, but you're also able to see if those buyers are iBuyers as well, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we can see who the actual buyer is. We can also I've seen cases where we use another one of our objects. You've probably seen this one too, Ariel, our linked properties object inside the property detail API. That'll show everything that homeowner owns, their whole portfolio. And when we were early on testing it, we came across a big iBuyer. I think it was Open Door. I don't remember. Maybe it was Invitation, somebody. And we were able to go and see everything, like all 30,000 doors or whatever it was. It was pretty remarkable.
That's, yeah, incredible insights. Could really help with understanding, where movement, supply, and purchases is happening in a specific area. So we also have a question here from Kareem. So people try to merge data from various sources like the MLS, other public resources. The best field to merge on is probably APN, but also sometimes APN isn't available. You just have address. So does Real Estate API provide any normalization for address to help merge these different sources?
We do. It's probably the most gnarly part of this whole thing. Address normalization is a bear. And again, if you're trying to do it on a small data set, small geo, I say, God bless you, go for it. You may not need something as robust as us. But if you're trying to do it nationally, it is a bear. The short answer is yes, we do that. We actually have an address verification API specifically to do this thing so that you can, at scale, normalize, confirm valid addresses, and normalize those addresses to our formatting spec.
Incredible. But yeah, this is one of the biggest pain points that I've had in the past. I just thought okay, the US probably, maybe counties are separate, but there has to be some normalization of how addresses are labeled and how that looks like across the US. And it's not at all, right, Vince?
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not. We recently onboarded a USPS data set to help some of that normalization. We're moving towards a CAS certification, which is something we haven't really announced that publicly, but I'm happy to share it with you. Just to try to help in this regard, because even the USPS, I don't want to bore your viewers to tears, but even that's not like a definite thing. It's actually a scoring system, and it's just way more complicated than people think. It's just really, really complex.
Yeah, no, we can go as detailed as you like. Another tip for those who are Python developers, you can use fuzzy wuzzy logic to help with matching. Although not perfect, it is something that I've done in the past too. So while we wait for some more questions, Vince, what are some things that excite you about maybe newer data sources that you've brought in, or ones that you're expecting to also integrate?
Yeah, I would say that we are really excited about our MLS product. I think humbly, it is the most elegant MLS solution out there. Not only because of the coverage, which is nationwide, 90+%, but also because we have done some of this work that your viewer was talking about to normalize across PR, public record, and MLS data. So it's just a very elegant solution. We're really proud of it. We are hoping to have permit data by the top of the year. We're working with a provider that we're very excited about. We like their product very much, and we're just doing some analysis right now. That's really cool. Some of the things that you can determine about opportunities in a neighborhood or a geo based on permits. And there's some of this people data, like we were talking about earlier. There's some people data that we're chasing right now, that divorce intent I talked about. And the people stuff, again, is just that stuff is cool. It's really gray, requires a lot of creativity, requires connecting lots of dots that don't seem like they should connect. But we're really excited about that. That's a longer term play because it is so complex. Um, and the relationships aren't necessarily linear, but super excited about that stuff.
Oh, yeah, I could imagine how complex that is, just because when I was at Appfolio and we were working on criminal eviction records
Oh,
to
wow.
map them out, you come to realize, same issue with addresses, these counties, you would think, okay, each person just they have their social and you can map everyone. Not the case, once again.
Right.
So that is pretty difficult of a task as well to be able to merge these different data sets just
Yeah.
off of someone's name.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I'm curious, and again, I'm happy to talk data sets, what we're seeing in the market, products, what have you. I'm curious because I think that you, like us, have an interesting vantage point that most people in prop tech do not, because you're talking to builders all the time. What are the product ideas, targets, silos that you get asked about the most? I'm always curious what the builders out there, what are they excited about? What do you see people working towards a lot?
So let me start with the pain point. The pain point is that those who maybe use softwares like a PropStream, which is great in its own respect,
Mhm.
they come to realize if they don't have $3,000 a month on marketing
Yeah,
to constantly reach out to these property owners, they just get lost in the mix. So
yeah.
they realize, oh, I'm chasing leads that maybe 50 other people, if not more, are chasing with bigger
Mhm.
dollar amounts than I do. How do I get an advantage by having either a different list that's more fresher
Yeah.
or having a more targeted marketing aspect? So that's where I see, like, say, Real Estate API can really be a benefit, is because you can segment this data in all different ways. You can have very targeted messaging. So someone who is in pre-foreclosure that has a 3-bed, 2-bath, um, and maybe specifics about how many properties they've owned, et cetera, to have that messaging crafted, not like, hey, can I help you? You're in pre-foreclosure. But
Mhm.
hey, I see that you may be in the trying to retire soon. You've owned other properties. This one has been a little bit of an issue for you to hold.
Yeah.
Can I help you with your property? Like, that messaging comes across so much smoother for the person who's either getting into the game or has less dollars to spend.
Mhm. Mhm. And you're seeing people pursue that angle, trying to do a little bit more savvier, a little more clever with the targeting on their lead list. You're seeing that?
Yeah, so I'm seeing
Yeah.
people pairing web scraping
Mhm.
with being able to use an API to enrich the list, because
Yeah.
once it lands, say, on PropStream, it's already too late unless you have, again, thousands of dollars to spend per
Yeah.
month to market to those leads.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's right. I think that's right. To your point, we have seen people do some pretty clever things because they have this granular level of access through our warehouse, and combining kind of what you're talking about, some property stuff, but also some people stuff. So, one that came up was, house over, it depends on your geo, but 3,000, 4,000 square feet, whatever it is, big house. House is over 3,000, 4,000 square feet. Ownership tenure is 25 years, 30 years. Marriage status is X. Well, you can pretty easily intuit that this is an empty nester, right? So you got an empty nester in your target geo, has got this big house that he doesn't need anymore, she doesn't need anymore. Pretty good chance that they are at least thinking about, somebody in that house has thought about downsizing, right? And so these are the kinds of things. This is why I like people data so much, right? Is you go, oh wow, that totally makes sense, right? Or even because we have down to and then the property info object, we will show you not just the size, but also like the number of stories. Well, maybe this need that I'm talking about is even more acute if it's a 2-story house or a 3-story house, right? Not too many empty nesters who are over 70 years old need a 3-story, 3,500 square foot house. You know what I'm saying? So these are the kinds of real world scenarios that you can tease out if you just kind of think a bit, right? Just look at this smorgasbord of data and filters that you have. I always say that tie it back to the real world. What's going on in somebody's life for real? That makes them want to do business with you, makes them want to do a transaction or need to do a transaction.
Yes, I absolutely love that because at times when we're trying to implement all these things and we're just trying to reach out to the property owner, we may get lost. And what is the actual intent? What is the motivation here? So that's why, Vince, I started this project this week of return to office because I myself, the whole reason why I got into real estate was because I hated the commute going into New York
Yeah,
City every day. So
yeah, yeah,
2 hours each way.
yeah.
And it really dictated my decision to go into real estate, where I decided to live, et cetera. Now, myself, I moved after 2020 to Tampa, Florida, because
Mhm.
I, alongside many folks who are in tech, where they couldn't get tech employees, were told, we're going to be flexible going forward.
Right.
You could either live anywhere or, maybe just come in once in a while.
Yeah.
Myself, family members, and coworkers I've worked with have all gone to suburbs or to other areas. And
Mhm.
now companies like Amazon saying return to the office.
That's right.
So instead of me going after, say, a list that maybe I don't really understand the person's full intent, I can
Mhm.
now think in the person's shoes of, oh, someone who just bought a house recently may
Yeah,
not have the equity to be able to sell it on market.
yeah,
And because of that, they will need to be able to sell creatively. So now I can make a query to real estate API, marrying that with like employee data to be able to target a list that actually makes sense to sell at this time. So I
yeah.
just wanted to call out that what you
I
meant
just
makes sense.
listen. I really hope that you guys are paying attention to what Ariel just did there. This, I mean, that's genius, right? That is what separates um, good from great investors, good from great even technologists, frankly, because it's getting beyond the bits and bytes, getting beyond just the number of fields and the right. What is going on in real life? What is the real world scenario, right? What are we solving for, in the flesh? And the fact that she's got this personal, visceral connection to the scenario, and there's a small subset of the population that can do this, and even small relate that is, but an even smaller subset who can tease it out in data and have the technical chops, right, to go in there and find the people who are in this bucket with them. So if you can, man, use your own personal experience and bring that intelligence to the data, that's how you win. I'm telling you, all this. I think the era, frankly, just being real candid here, I think the era of mailing a list to somebody who's 60 days down, it means they're 60 days behind on their mortgage. Mailing a list to their 60 days down, 90 days down, the basic pre-foreclosure list. I think those days are over. I think they've been over, frankly, and we've been saying that for a while. I think the REI industry, has some. Well, I want to be careful. I just think that maybe we haven't been as honest, as candid with this crowd as we should have been. And not me, I'm not an educator or a guru, but I mean the REI space maybe has not been as candid as they should with people, telling them go after 60 days down and absentee owner by itself, and not doing this deeper work that Ariel's describing. That market is 3 years in the rearview mirror.
Yeah,
It's
I
just
mean,
it's,
you may
it's
not
too
feel
hard.
comfortable saying it, but I can. Those are trash lists, to be honest. So, and you're being marketed by gurus on
Yeah,
selecting lists that, yeah, like three plus years.
yeah,
But with that, say if maybe you're not sure where to start, like how do I understand how to use real world scenarios?
yeah.
Some of the best things right now is literally using Facebook, TikTok, Reddit. What are people talking about in
That's
your
right.
given area? Where are the pain points? Sometimes it could be a little bit difficult to synthesize that, but if you just start being a part of local groups and just kind of being
Yeah.
a sleuth and watching from the outside, you'll learn pretty quickly.
Totally agree. It's a trend that I don't have a lot of expertise around, but I see opportunity here. And I'm just going to throw it out there as a general, just sort of chum the water, and you guys can go and run with it and build something beautiful. Is co-living is big, big, big. It is big and only getting bigger. And I don't have a personal frame of reference. I can't yet do what Ariel did a moment ago and put myself in the shoes. Not yet, but I'm going to find somebody. I'm going to find somebody in my circle who's doing it, living it, who can explain to me what motivated them to go that route. and I'm going to get a deep understanding. But if you guys have that understanding of what's motivating people into these, individual room you rent, kind of shared space, shared kitchen, everybody has their own bathroom, or maybe there's a couple of bathrooms. That is big, 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 and only getting bigger. And it's because of the lack of housing stock. You guys already know that story. Um, just the way that younger people think about their living situation more broadly, like this is just the kind of thing that I'd get smart on real fast.
I completely agree with that. I do see in the future long-term rentals to be profitable for individuals
Yeah,
could go away, where like really the only way to be in real estate and to make money is through alternative strategies like medium-term rentals, short-term rentals, and co-living.
totally agree. Totally
Yeah.
agree. I mean, you look at where prices are now. I mean, gosh, if you pay sticker for a house and you just put one tenant in it, unless you're in a really good, attractive geo, um, I mean, it's tough. You're 4, 5, 6 capping it right now. Thankfully, all the stuff that we own, we bought, a while ago, and we bought in good markets, and our cap rates are really, really attractive. But man, if I had to be, especially if you're in like a high tax state where that's eating up your NOI, crazy, you're going to have to do something alternative. Like she said, medium term or co-live, something like that. Really, I would get smart on this very, very quickly.
Excellent piece of advice. So I'd love to get back to some of the questions that we have.
Sure. Yeah.
Uh, Kareem has a great question here in terms of how often is data refreshed? Now, I know Jose may be more of an expert to answer this here, but from my understanding is that it really is dependent on also how often the county refreshes data, correct?
Yeah. So, and Jose certainly can give a more nuanced answer. What I can tell you, though, which I think gets to Kareem's question, is we do get the big data files that we're trying to cure you from having to deal with. So we do take in data, and we get a data file every day, literally every morning. And so we're updating our data pipelines every day. But to Ariel's point, it doesn't mean that there's changes every day, right? So we are listening for changes at the county every day. And when they come through, you see it in the API layer. But some counties are really good about it. Some counties not so much, right? It may be 6 months before you see a change in a given county. It just depends. Like I said, there's 3,000 of them.
Great response. And do you have any local code violations today or plan to possibly in the future?
We don't have code violations currently. We looked at a data set last year that we liked. It just kind of didn't make the short list. It's something that we're going to revisit in Q1. But the short answer is no, we don't have code violations.
Yeah, it's always an interesting aspect, right? So I have seen data companies, and this is irrespective of real estate, this is just in general, go the wrong direction at times where they are like, let me just get a breath of everything that someone can ask for.
Yeah, yeah.
Even if it's data that's not good. And then what happens? You waste marketing dollars on it. So I think it's good that when you are thinking about other parts of other data sets to bring in, you're carefully really reviewing them before making that decision.
Yeah, we're trying to be very disciplined. There's so much to fix and make easier in this space because of, again, the structural way this has been done for 20 years. There's so much that we can fix and make people's lives better on with what we're doing right now. We don't need to stretch. We don't need to stretch.
Great. And this is an excellent statement here. So a lot of folks fall into the camp of they are getting their feet wet into real estate data technology. And I definitely understand that it could be overwhelming at first. There's a lot of different moving pieces. So how does one start to understand maybe resources or ways to get engaged in this kind of community?
I mean, honestly, and I mean this sincerely, I really think you're in the right place to do that already. I think Ariel, what was it, 2 years ago I found you, Ariel, right? And because I was looking for who is the person, right? To your viewer's question, who is the person that is guiding people across the chasm, right? They were a just viewer of this market. They had been considering it, right? They were just a viewer, and they go, I kind of want to get in. I don't know how to start. Maybe I want to be an investor. Maybe I want to build a product. Maybe I want to do both. Maybe I want to serve my house account. And then, they don't know. And there's technical considerations, there's real estate considerations. And I just think in what I saw in your channel, even back then, was this is somebody who gets it, right? Let me say this, and this is maybe shocking to a lot of you guys. You would be stunned how many people who are in the real estate data world who are not real estate people don't know real estate, deal in, buy, transact, study real estate. Staggering. And so just to answer your question again, I really think you're in the best place. I think tech and real estate is providing that resource. The content is great. It is both technical and market oriented, and it's from somebody who is actually studying real estate. We don't do much in the way of education yet. We do have a webinar that our developers do. It's fairly technical. We need to get better about it, but it's part of why we like Ariel's channel and her audience so much, and why we have agreed to do things like this. But I think you're in the right place is the short answer.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, Vince. And other thing that I want to mention is, there are other sources out there, and I encourage you to, stretch your mind into other people who are experts in tech and real estate. But always caution, like, what are they just regurgitating what they've heard versus experience as well. So one of the biggest pain points I see is that there are small tools developed and it doesn't really fit anyone's need. Why? Because the person who created it is non-technical. They send the project over to someone overseas who doesn't even know about real estate investing. And then you end up with this whole chain of every time a change needs to be made into the product, it takes anywhere from 1 to 3 months and isn't done as correctly. Let me give you an example here. So one of our features that we have in Coffee Closers is to be able to find a property that you could potentially add a bedroom to. Now, initially, this was just a really simple, okay, is 1,600, square feet divided by 3, is it whatever? And, label it as yes, potentially. But in Texas, the homes are huge.
Yeah.
The homes are huge, but it doesn't mean you should always be adding a bedroom to it. And we came to realize, based on each county and each type of property, if it has number of bedrooms as well, is how we had to change our algorithm to be able to really flag you can add a bedroom or not. Now, I know how to do this because I'm in the data and I'm also a data expert. Someone who builds a solution, who just hands off the project to someone overseas without that domain expertise, you're really going to get something that's not as quality. So that's just a little call out to be noticeable. Notice those things, especially when it comes to real estate. It is that domain that you have to have both sides of expertise driving and building these products.
Couldn't say it any better. Totally agree.
Excellent.
Totally agree.
Here we also have another question from Eric. So if you could elaborate a little bit more on the potential offering for permit data. When are you looking to maybe analyze the data a bit more and determine if you're going to have it within the product from the API, and when would you anticipate it for it to be rolled out?
Yes, the analysis is ongoing. That's happening right now. We would like to have it in the product top of the year, certainly Q1, is that end of January or is that end of March? I don't know, but it's something that we would like to have in the product in Q1, and likely it will be a dedicated endpoint where you'd be able to pull back permit data for a given address or search by permit types and find properties in a given geo that have those permits out.
Excellent. Thanks for that update.
Yep.
And I remember in the past, you were looking for owner data as well for like credit score information. Is that available, and any updates on that?
So we have made some progress on that. Our people side of the house, which we call skip trace. And just really quickly, if I can just double tap on this for a moment, skip trace is really a misnomer. We use that term because this industry has come to adopt it. But a skip trace is an actual thing. It's a law enforcement term that when a bail bondsman or a bounty hunter was hired to trace the whereabouts of someone who had skipped town, they called it a skip trace. And but that costs anywhere from these days $20 to $50 to $100 each. But that's a skip trace. People in this industry started using that to talk about finding phone numbers. We've adopted it. You'll see it on our website. I just always feel the need to clarify when I'm on a forum like this, because I believe in precision. So anyway, with that said, our skip trace API will give you phone numbers and email addresses. There is a bonus. There's a premium response that you can get that will give you a FICO range. We can't give you a score even if we had it, just because of regulations, but it will give you a FICO range.
And why would someone care about a FICO range? Like, what does that help to determine if someone may be motivated to sell?
Well, I'll go you one better. It can say something about motivation to sell. It can also say something about the options, the ways in which they may be able to buy. So if your viewers are familiar with, for example, a subject to deal, which is a little bit of an advanced kind of strategy where you will take over a house subject to the current mortgage staying in place. Well, there's two sides of that transaction. There's the homeowner who's in some sort of distress. They need to move. But these are typically nice houses, really good looking, livable houses day one. And there's some equity in them. This homeowner has fallen on bad times. And the person who a creative investor can link with that seller is someone who may not have great credit, but they got cash, right? And so if you find someone who's a high earner, but doesn't have the credit to get their own mortgage, you provide a service by connecting them with that seller. And we can talk about the mechanics of how the deal is structured if you care to. But the idea is that there are lots of buyers out there who have cash but not credit. And so you can use FICO range both to identify financial situation of sellers, which is how people normally think about it. But you can also use it to identify potential buyers of a certain type of deal a certain type of deal.
Excellent. And sometimes that almost seems like, wait, someone can have that problem? All this cash,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
not the credit score or maybe the ability to purchase
You'd be
unemployment
surprised.
history. But yeah,
You'd be surprised. It's a lot of entrepreneurs, who may make a lot of cash, or a couple of years ago they had a bankruptcy and now they're flush, right? So they got cash, but they don't have credit. It happens more than you think.
good point. So for someone who they are technical, right? Maybe they work full time right now as data analyst, scientist, or engineer, and they want to
Mhm.
get into building solutions for real estate because, as we know, there are a plethora of different problems that can be solved.
Yeah.
But maybe they are just getting into the space, so they don't have that domain expertise. They don't want to wait, 3 years to do it on their own to get that. What do you think about partnerships, and what would you suggest to someone who's trying to build out a proof of concept but needs that domain expert?
Yeah, I would find somebody in your market who's actually doing the business. I just can't stress, again, Ariel used the right term, which is domain expertise. It's just, to me, it's the differentiator. Part of why we stood out even when we were making SaaS products is that I think we were one of the first shops where we had world-class technical chops and real estate chops, and it's exceedingly rare. I think you see it more now. My business partner ran a mortgage company, for God's sakes, right? I was an investor for over a decade, and we just had a unique blend. And so maybe you can't find somebody like my business partner, or maybe somebody quite, like Ariel or her level, but there's somebody in your market who is doing deals, or they're a very successful agent. They're systems oriented, they're sharp, they're great marketers. They can help you understand the real world of the business. And I would connect with them before I wrote a line of code. We have a lot of really sharp engineers and developers come to us. Hey, I got this idea to do this thing. And I'm like, who told you that was a problem? who's losing sleep over that? Why do you think that that's a problem that needs to be solved, and that you are the person to go and solve it if you've never dealt with it yourself? I just would be very, very careful about good ideas in search of a problem like that. I think that is not the way to go.
Very fair point. And actually, fun fact, when I first started this whole tech and real estate channel, the focus was going to be these like detailed, deep data science projects of, how to uncover motivated sellers by adding these scores, XYZ.
Yeah.
So then as I started to put my initial videos out, which would take me, hours to generate the content, to edit it, and then post, I realized there was the problem of just being able to acquire the data, to make
Mhm.
sense of it, to automate processes. So even though I'm not by any means an automation specialist, even though maybe at this stage I have a lot of experience in it, I realized that there was a problem before even getting to that level, by just
Mm.
listening to what the experts around me and the feedback that I was getting. So to your point, Vince, I completely agree. If you have an idea, great, but try to validate that with someone
Yeah,
who does have domain expertise, and you will be shocked how many people are willing to help, especially in the real estate space.
absolutely. There are wonderful agents out there who have some little kink in their workflow that if they could work that out with technology, they could boost their production by 30, 40, 50%. There are investors out there who are marketing geniuses. And if they could work out this little kink in their workflow, or if they could figure out how to get to this avatar of seller that they know is out there, but they don't have the technical chops to you know, go through the data to find, they could double, their revenue. Get with those guys. That's going to be how you get the domain expertise that Ariel's talking about.
Yeah, and a little tip there is for those who are looking to, maybe have the option to work and achieve financial freedom, which a lot of people strive for in real estate. Sometimes you don't have to actually own the properties. You could be someone who facilitates tools to do so as well. So,
That's right.
think of different ways you can monetize or receive passive income through real estate aside from just physically owning properties.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Anything you'd like to leave the viewers with, Vince?
Um, well, what might be helpful? I'll briefly share some things that I have witnessed over the last couple of weeks. This is the beginning of conference season in our space. And so I was at Blueprint in Vegas a couple of weeks ago, and I was at a mastermind in Tampa. In fact, last week I made it out just in time to beat Helen, get out of there. And I'll share with you some trends that I heard talked about a lot from stage. And again, just kind of chum the water a bit and let your viewers go out there and create products and build beautiful things. One is around the NAR settlement, which everybody's heard about, 400 some odd $1 million settlement. And it went active August 17th. And so post August 17, the MLS can't show an offer of compensation to the buying agent. It's a pretty gnarly problem. Maybe not, catastrophic as the press has tried to make it out to be. But there are lots of folks now who are ideating around, how do we solve this? Is there technology? Is there going to be a single registry where agents go and publish what they're offering in terms of commission, and then they can do it outside of the MLS? I don't know. We don't know what it's going to look like. We wrote a blog post about it on August 16th, on the eve of it going live. But it's something that you guys should be hip to because it's a problem in the real world, right? And then the other one I would say that I heard a lot about is people are back to talking about fractionalization. And so, not the big blockchain wackiness that we saw a few years ago, but fractionalization by way of blockchain in order to facilitate, fractional ownership of the property for investment platforms. And so a lot of them are coming to us to create the digital twin of the property, which moves towards fractionalization. Once we solve that whole market gets the liquidity that it needs. So this is a big problem in the real world. There's lots of institutional dollars that want to be able to support fractional platforms, but they got to solve some technical challenges first. So I don't know, maybe that's helpful, but just some things that I've heard in the last couple of weeks that are buzzing in the industry right now that people want to solve with technology.
Super useful context, especially that, a lot of us may not be plugged into these conferences. This is incredible insight. So
Sure.
with that, I want to share my screen once more. And first, thank you everyone for the incredible questions. Um, Love how we were able to get very detailed here as well. So for next live stream, next week, we're going to have Mark, who is going to get deep into buy box. So I hear a lot of folks say, if they're getting into real estate, how do I know if a property is an actually good deal? We're going to pull up live several different properties, and within 5 minutes, each property will screen, is this a good deal or not? So with that, thank you so much, Vince. And how could people follow you as well as Real Estate API?
So I'm pretty boring. I'm not sure you care to follow me, but if you do want to see pictures of me and my kids or whatever, I'm at Investor Vince. I occasionally post from these conferences and things like that. So at Investor Vince, no dashes, no spaces on Instagram. But the more important thing is to just stay tuned to the website, which is realestateapi.com. We also have a Discord channel, which is really active these days, and you'll see some of these buzzy conversations going on there from our current and soon to be customers who have really great product ideas.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Vince, for your time.